Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular afternoon council meeting for January 16th, 2024, our first meeting of the year. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Corporate officer, any late items? No late items. You're gonna motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Van Elfen and Betts, all in favor? That carries. Consent agenda. Would anybody like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 1, the Royal BC Museum.
Sorry, which one?
Item number 1, the Royal BC Museum.
Oh, okay, A, yeah, under the correspondence.
Oh, pardon me, yeah.
Yeah. So that'll go down to item number 9. Anything else? Okay, if I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. Councillor Barkwell, Councillor Peak, all in favor? That carries. And delegations. Mr. Lorney from the Garnet Valley Agritourism Association. Just push the button there so the red light comes on and you're set to go. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Holmes, councillors, and staff. A number of us formed the Garnet Valley Agritourism Association 2 years ago. And we did this to promote and protect our farming and tourism related businesses in Garnet Valley. And we represent farms, wineries, horse stables, tourist accommodation. And we're very concerned about the proposal for a gravel pit in our midst. And I do mean in our midst. There's at least 4 of our members' properties either adjoin or are across the road from this proposal. And to be very specific on the reasons for our objections and why our homes, families, businesses, etc., are directly negatively affected by this proposal. First of all, road safety. Garnet Valley Road is a narrow, winding country road, and it's used by cyclists, pedestrians, horse riders, and 2,000 plus dump trucks, and that's not an exaggeration, a year, running up and down Garnet Valley Road, where in many places there are no or very narrow shoulders. That's a huge safety risk. We have environmental concerns. Garnet Valley is prime mule deer breeding country, an overwintering ground. And I can remember counting easily 75 animals in the hills above our property. Ineas Creek runs the length of Garnet Valley, and it's vulnerable to slides and sediment. And I gather there's already been a little bit of that problem on that property. Noise and dust. These things are inherent in an operation that requires heavy equipment, rock crushing, etc. There are farms and B&Bs adjoining and across the road from the proposed site. Road damage. The road itself was rebuilt about 6 or 7 years ago, but it was not built for the level of use and built to withstand the heavy truck traffic that would occur. It'll cost the district a ton of money to keep it repaired. And agritourism, this is now happening in Garnet Valley, and agritourism will far outstrip a gravel pit as a job generator. And the Mid-Okanagan has solid, reliable, long-term supply of aggregates. We have numerous pits within 10 miles of Summerland. And these existing suppliers are located in areas historically used for industry, resource extraction, and that's where they belong. So to sum up, our organization, Garnet Valley Agritourism Association, is unanimous in our strong opposition to the gravel pit application. And Garnet Valley is a valuable community asset that has historical, natural, agricultural, and environmental attributes. So a gravel pit in our midst will have major negative consequences for all these things. It will be a highly inappropriate use of Garnet Valley land. So our request at this meeting is that the Summerland Council state their strong opposition to the Garnet Valley gravel pit application. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions if they are forthcoming.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Larney. And that, of course, is on the agenda for tonight, the discussion on the application. Council, any questions for Mr. Larney? Don't see any. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all very much.
Moving on to the public comment opportunity. This is for business items. So anything under the business items, section 7. Don't see any. Moving on to the business items, 7.1, the 5-year capital plan adjustment for the Garnet Dam spillway widening. Mr. Dennegar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a good news council report. In 2023, staff applied for a grant opportunity that was offered by the Investment Agriculture Foundation of BC, the IAF. And the grant was the Agriculture Water Infrastructure Grant. So we applied for this grant, to this grant for the Garnet Spillway widening, which is on the 5-year capital plan. And we were successful in that for the grant maximum of $1 million. So our application was accepted and we were awarded that. But before we crack the champagne, there are some implications to accepting this grant. The grant stipulates that the project has to be completed by the end of next year. Right now in the 5-year capital program, for the water utility, we have this project being completed the year after that. So it does require an adjustment to our capital plan. On top of that, in order to bring this project forward a year, we would need to move a project out a year. And that's for borrowing and financial reasons for the water utility, but it's also a workload issue for Devin and I to take on this project along with the other projects that we have in that year. Between Devin and I, we manage $14 million in capital projects this year between the two of us. Our staff are all operators and power line technicians. So Devin and I, we share that workload. And we've been really successful in delivering our capital program, but we don't want to overload us too much. So we would need to push something out. And the thing that we're suggesting is the chlorine project for the water treatment plant. If council does want to accept this grant, that's a project we could push a year. The financial implications section of the report show that the Garnet Valley Spillway project, this is a spillway widening project, and in the background section, it does talk about why we need to widen that spillway. But that in the 5-year program, we show that project, which is $3.8 million, and that's a budgetary estimate, is funded through grants, 100%. So right now with this grant award, that's $1 million. We would need to fund the rest, the balance, which is $2.8 million through our utility, the water utility. The financial implications section shows a couple options for borrowing money to do that. And it shows a 3.31% to 3.76% rate increase for water users to fund the balance ourselves. I believe this rate increase would start in 2026. Is that right, Dave? Yeah, yeah, 2026 after the project's completed. So it's a couple of years out still that we'd see the increase. But it is $1 million. So we can either wait and try for other grants, or we could move forward with this. And of course, when other grants come forward, we may be able to apply. If other grants come forward, we may be able to apply for the balance, the Summerland portion, but we can't guarantee those grants will be available. So for right now, just in summary, we've been awarded $1 million. We haven't signed the contract for that yet. We wanted to come to council first. So if you'd like to bring that project forward, that is what the staff recommendation is, to bring the project forward, accept $1 million and begin work on that project. We'd have to start right away. Devin and I have looked at it, and we feel we can deliver that project in the time frame that we're given by the grant. So if you have any questions, we're ready to answer.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell, then Councillor Van Elsen.
I guess I've got two questions, really. The first one is in our long-term water capital plan, which is we received not that long ago, December 2021. This project is projected to be only $1.5 million in 2025. How did it go from $1.5 million to $4 million in such a short time? And also I compare it to the what's the difference between it and the spillway expansion at Eisentalk, which was $2 million?
Dave, I don't know if you have the capital plan up in front of you or not, but the spillway widening at Eisentalk is a little different than the one at Garnet. The spillway widening at Garnet, because it abuts that road there, and there's also the bridge right below it, may need to be changed. We also want to do riprap along the dam at the same time. That dam is experiencing erosion where the water line meets the dam. So there's a few other items we want to include. We haven't gone out with a design for an RFP for this project, so we don't know the final value. We feel we've overestimated on the cost, but again, we haven't gone out with a design and had actual prices come in for construction at this point. So it's probably similar to Eisentalk, but it could be more. So we don't want to go into the project, again, it's budgetary estimates. We don't want to go into the project with a low ball and then come in over on that.
Just it looks pretty straightforward, but of course, you know, I'm not a dam engineer. The other thing is what is our obligation on this? I understand that, you know, they revised the standards the dams had to meet, and we're operating at maybe lower capacity than we would otherwise. But is it really worth spending $3 million to, we're going to increase the capacity after this a little bit? And is it, you know, is that acre feet of storage really worth $3 million?
Those are great questions through the mayor. When we conducted our consequence classification review of this dam recently, it came back with a very high consequence classification, which is the spillway isn't designed for that right now. That's to spill a certain amount of water. And so just to back it up even a little bit more, the spillway is an asset that is built to protect the dam. So if we have a lot of water inundation into the reservoir, it needs to be big enough to pass that water. And so Dam Safety's had some recent changes around how they like to design that and for what type of flood they want that designed for. And so the spillway passes that water so that the water doesn't go over the dam. And if it overtops the dam, you're going to lose the dam. And then all of the reservoir drains downstream, which basically floods downtown Summerland. So Dam Safety is saying to us, we want a wider, larger spillway to pass more water in the event of a flood so that you don't breach the dam. And so that consequence classification is coming in at very high. But we are only just below the next classification, which is extreme. And that's calculated based on the loss of life downstream of the dam. So dam safety has provided us with a letter of support for this grant application. They are saying that you need to widen the spillway, so it's a regulatory requirement.
Follow up on the same one?
So could we just lower the dam? Like maybe we don't need that water. We can just, for at least the time being, provide the irrigation through the Trail Creek system. I mean, I know we can physically if we had to. But would we be able to get some sort of authorization or certification for much less storage or?
Through the mayor, we haven't analyzed that question. Like, do we need Garnet Valley Reservoir at all? Or maybe we only need a fraction of it. Right now, the reservoir, we pass water to the lake about 3 times as much as we use out of that reservoir. But the farming that's going on in that valley that's supplied by the Garnet Valley Reservoir is using a lot of water. And it's water we wouldn't want to treat. So we wouldn't want to pass it through the treatment plant. We would need to analyze that. Can we get that from Trail Creek? How do we get it up Garnet Valley? So there'd be a bunch of infrastructure we would need in order to do that. But we would need council to provide us with direction to study that option.
Yeah, Councilor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question through Jeremy. Comments, I don't know. So it's, maybe Devin can correct me or clarify, but it was probably 11, 12 years ago, first time I was on council when Tuscalinda dam let go in Oliver. And at that time, dam safety came and said we needed to upgrade our spillway. Now that's 12 years ago or so. And here we are today. That at that time, the argument was, and then we were told we had to decrease the volume in behind the dam for dam safety. So then you skip forward to 2017-18 when we had the flooding on Garnet Avenue and all through Garnet Valley. A larger spillway is not going to stop that. So like I applaud our staff. I don't know how you guys do it, because last year I went up to the dam and went, there's no way we're going to have enough water. And sure enough, it came to full pool. And I don't think it spilled last year, but we had ample amount of water. So I know it's not an exact science, and I don't know how your guys do it. I don't know how you're going to do it this year with our snowpacks that are so low, but I'm concerned by increasing the width of the spillway. How does that help us downstream? And we can still allow water out at any given time, even, more frequently through the year to keep us at that full pool. But by spending this money, what are we gaining? We're not gaining anything further downstream because there's the choke points is downstream. So the bigger spillway letting out more water, I don't see how what we're accomplishing, to be honest with you. That just a thought.
Yeah, thank you for that comment through the mayor. What this project does is lowers the risk of breaching the dam. This project does, other than that aspect, it doesn't do anything for the downstream properties or downtown Summerland. But it does lower the risk of a dam breach. And if that reservoir was to breach, the consequence is very high and close to extreme as far as dam safety is concerned.
Councilor Trainer.
Jeremy, do you know, are there grants available for the chlorine gas conversion project?
Thank you. Through the mayor, we've looked for those and nothing's come up in a number of years for that we've seen. And we don't expect, we do see a lot of dam grants, and we were successful up at Eisentalk twice. Here we go again. Now we have a Garnet Valley Dam spillway widening that we're getting grants for. So it looks like the province is dishing out dam related grants at this time, but no, we haven't seen anything for the chlorine project.
So would there be an opportunity then, I think you said there would be, to get more money for this project? The reason why I'm asking is it just if we're borrowing 2.8 for this now, does that jeopardize us borrowing money again for chlorine gas conversion in a couple of years? Like, I'm just wondering if we should wait on the dam spillway to see if we can get full grant funding instead of taking out loans for both of these projects.
Thank you, through the mayor. That's a legitimate strategy to wait for full grant funding. And that's a hard decision to make. But it's our expectation, Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, but we would expect council to be borrowing money for this project and the chlorine conversion project that will be coming up in the future. So we'd see rate increases for both of those.
We received full grant funding for the Eisendock spillway. That was, yeah. Okay, Councillor Betts, Pat, and then Peak.
Thank you, through the mayor. So my question is very much in line with the deputy mayor trainer is, you know, we've had success in accessing full grant funding. And I guess it was just my understanding that we weren't going to be moving forward with this project unless it was 100% grant funded. Now I understand the consequence. It's an extreme consequence. And so, but it's also what's the likelihood of the event, right? And so that was a big part of that, that whole workshop that we did. So do we have an idea of what the likelihood of such an event, of a catastrophic failure of Garnet Dam would be?
Great question, through the mayor. We do. We have the analysis on that. I don't have it here with me, but it is something we can provide to council. That's called the consequence classification and the dam safety review. And those values are in there. Mhm.
Thank you, Worship. My question is similar, but I do have a question that back when we were discussing the conversion from chlorine gas to sodium hypochlorite, staff brought forward to us that if there was ever an incident at the water treatment plant in regards to the chlorine, that there would be a chlorine cloud that would come across and cause, you talk about loss of life. I think you brought that up in regards to the water treatment plant if there was an issue with the chlorine gas at some point. So my question then is, you tell us for the chlorine gas that there could be loss of life if there was a failure at the water treatment plant. You tell us that there could be losses with the spillway. So I guess my question being is, this is a bad question, what has the highest rate of a potential failure that could affect Summerland the most? And in my head, I'm feeling that it is the chlorine gas. So the chlorine gas to our sodium hypochlorite would be a far better way, or where we should be putting our money at this point, rather than into a spillway while we wait for further grant funding. You can tell me what your thoughts are in regards to that.
Thank you for the question, through the mayor. So that is the exact question that we talk about in our offices and with our staff. What should our recommendation be for this project? It's chlorine conversion or it's the spillway. So we felt that the water treatment plant's been operating with chlorine since it was built, and that a delay of 1 year would be acceptable. Would be an acceptable trade for $1 million, which would help our rates, because $1 million is a lot of money. So by delaying the chlorine conversion by 1 year, that would be okay with staff in order to accept $1 million grant. Now, leaving Garnet Valley Spillway the way it is and waiting for full grant funding is absolutely a great strategy, and continue with chlorine project. That would not bother us one bit as staff. We would love to do the chlorine project this year. But we could also do it next year. That would be acceptable to us.
Councillor Peak?
Thank you. I think perhaps my question's really been answered, but it is risk benefit and how far you move a project forward. With the discussion you've had so far, I don't see a problem in pushing the chlorine project ahead a year and taking advantage of $1 million. There's no guarantee, and in receiving grants that we would receive them in the next 2 years to mitigate a loan in any case. And I know that's a gamble, but track records aren't wonderful.
Councillor Fargo?
I remember when the whole dam issue, no pun intended, came up with the flooding at Testolinen. And the province went around and they reviewed the dam safety requirements for all the dams in the province. And they sort of said, the standard is not a 1 in 1,000 event, a 1 in 1,000 year event. It's now a 1 in 10,000 year event. And that would be like a flood year and an earthquake at the same time or something like that. And so every community, or not every community, but lots and lots of communities are faced with these situations of upgrading the dams. I know Penticton is looking at some big expenses as well. But for this particular dam, I think that the way I'm leaning is I think we need a little bit more information, a little bit more detailed cost estimates on what it will cost. And I'm willing to take a gamble and forego this grant and in anticipation of a better plan, a more informative plan for the Garnet Valley, and the chance that we might get more than just a quarter of the estimated funding. I think that it's got a good spillway. It certainly was a better spillway than what was originally there before. Now I'm not sort of putting myself in the place of a dam expert who happens to live in Summerland and might be in the pathway of Garnet Valley. I don't know, but he looks after the province and all these issues, but it doesn't seem to be quite as pressing. It's been 10 years. They seem to be handing out money for grant improvement, dam improvements, and let's try that. I don't know how council feels, but I sort of heard that a little bit, and could go that way myself.
Okay, so this was an agricultural water infrastructure grant, right? And so the maximum was $1 million. Obviously, the Eisentalk spillway funding was a different program, would have been. So is that other program still up and running, that we got the money from the spillway for the Eisentalk? And could we apply under that same program? Or I mean, well, I guess the bigger question, what other grant opportunities are out there? Because being an agricultural grant, that's pretty specific and not specifically a dam project.
At this time, we're not aware of any. I believe that one is still up and running, but I'm not certain if there's an additional stream for it. But we will look, and we are constantly looking. And it seems to make sense given the grant opportunities that we've had for dams and reservoirs in the past, that may be available in future.
Mm-hmm. And then follow up some of the other items that you wanted to include in the project, or like shoring up the dam, the riffraff, and all that sort of stuff. Would that normally be able to could you include that in a grant application if it's more dam specific? And if so, that's part A of that question, and then part B would be if we went with if we took the 1 million and we did the spillway, could we just not include those other items this time around and continue applying for grant funding for those other items? Can you break it down in any way to just try and get that cost down, scale the project down so it's we can take advantage of that $1 million without having to spend so much of our own?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, those are good comments. We could scale back the scope of the project to some extent. The grant for Eisentalk was administered by UBCM, and it was the Disaster Risk Reduction Climate Adaptation Grant. So that's from the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. And so that grant didn't have the ceiling that this one has at $1 million. So we could look at reducing scope, but right now we have a deadline of tomorrow, I believe, to sign this grant. We asked for an extension so we could get this in front of you today. We were supposed to sign it in December. So if we don't sign today, we could ask them for an additional extension, and we could try to reduce scope, but we still don't have a good estimate that's been out for RFP and received bids, something that we can really stand behind. So again, we could reduce scope as much as we can, but we're still going to be looking at probably a couple $1 million that we would need to come up with ourselves.
Councillor Peak.
$1 million is a 10% increase on our taxes. I would rather take a bird in the hand than go for over a 2-year span looking for further grants, but that's my inclination.
Councillor Bett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to, gain a little bit more context. So in the flooding of 2017, how did the Garnet Dam and spillway, how did it perform under those pressures at that time?
Yeah, thanks for the question through the mayor. So at that time, the spillway did handle it quite well. So what dam safety after the consequence classification was done, they determined that it was a very high classification, which is approximately 1 in 10,000 year flood. So we're, as Jeremy said, right on the border of very high and extreme classification. In extreme classification, they use a probable maximum flood, which is sort of when all the stars align and, something happens that likely will never happen. So currently, we've not had issues with it in the past for all the time it's been there. But there's always that potential. I wanted to add just a little bit to comments earlier. So we're currently, because of the lack of width, holding the reservoir down at 0.67 meters below full pool. And that was sort of a decision by council at the time, I think in 2014. What was determined by an engineer prior to that was that in order to be in compliance, we would have to hold it down at approximately 3.78 meters below full pool, which is significantly lower. And due to the potential for algae blooms, et cetera, in the summertime with the water being that low, the determination was made by staff and council in 2014 to raise it to, I believe it was a 1 in 1,000 year flood event, which was 0.67 below full pool, which is currently what we hold it at.
Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Worship. I think a little differently than Councillor Peak. I think that it's great, $1 million grant, but we still have to go to our citizens for $2.8 million. Then next year when we do, if we put the chlorine off, we're still going to have to go back to our citizens for another, whatever, couple $1 million through, for more money out of their pockets. I really feel that there are times that we save money when we don't accept these grants. And I truly think that this is one of those times. I think that we look for more grant opportunities for full funding or better funding than $1 million for the spillway. But I think that we're asking a lot of our citizens by an additional $2.8 million in additional tax charges.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through to Devin, if I may. So ever since we've twinned the system and we're getting our domestic water from the treatment plant, do we still need to keep the dam at that pool level if we're only using it for irrigation?
Thank you. Through the mayor. Yeah, we would continue to have to keep it at that level. The issue, of course, is that, if we have a flood event that that fills the spillway and potentially overtops the dam, then, then potentially there's a lot of loss of life. So it would be more for that purpose. Yeah.
But what I was meaning that we don't have the demand on the Garnet system for domestic. So it's only irrigation today. So we could reduce the level.
Yeah, we potentially could, if you're talking about 0.75 below full pool to a lower level. We could do that. There is, I think, there was a report put out at the time that suggested that anything below 2 meters lower than full pool would definitely have more potential for issues with the water, chlorine blooms and such.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell, and then we should get a motion on the table.
The issue with the algae bloom, district had it before, right? And that was probably a bigger issue when it was being used for domestic consumption. I think you mitigated it by having air pumps in the water. And would that handle, if we had to go to 2 meters below full pool, would the air infusion, I guess they call it, deal with that algae bloom? And what's its effect on I suppose that people wouldn't like it in their trickle systems.
Yeah, thanks for the question through the mayor. That's correct. We do have a bubbler system that may have some impact on, a large algae bloom. The issue, like you say, it is less an issue, I suppose, without the domestic being affected. But there are a lot of farms that have micro drip systems that have already complained when we've had small blooms that they're getting some material through that blocks their systems.
CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just for some perspective from my side would be that with the changes in provincial regulations and risk classifications, it puts us in a position that today we're a dam owner of a dam that has an undersized spillway. So that's a known risk we've now absorbed. We have that in our knowledge. The big difference for me between when I think about comparing the chlorine versus this is in the chlorine scenario, we have, containment units for that chlorine. We've got the chlorine stored in a facility that's rated for that purpose with venting and associated equipments for contingency in case there's some kind of leak. We have staff with the training and equipment and suits to deal with and manage. So we have a lot of control over the likelihood side of the equation, not total control. Could an asteroid hit the facility or something? Yes. What makes me nervous about the dam is we have very little control of upstream what happens there. Now we can manage for a lower pool, but in a significant snow melt and rain situation, that's going to fill up really quick. And we know we have an undersized spillway. And if it overtops, that's a significant risk that we, at that point, would have no ability to manage other than trying to evacuate homes, people, and livestock. So, again, it's obviously council's choice, but that's how I feel more comfortable. And when I signed off on the report and endorsing the advice, pushing out the chlorine side was because we do have a lot more control and contingency in how we manage that scenario versus Mother Nature.
I guess the question is, if it's bordering very high and extreme, then surely there should be full grant funding out there. You know, if it's that serious, then where's the money? And they already gave us the money for Eisentalk for this same thing they were concerned about. You know, this is dam safety telling us this is a concern, and so they gave us the money for that. So if they're telling us this is a concern here, give us the money for it, and we'll deal with it. That's I think is the you know, expecting Summerland taxpayers or ratepayers to fund something that is created because of climate change. And it's nothing that we've done. It hasn't been any change it's not because of any change we've made in the community here. It's because of things that are beyond our control. And if the government isn't able to help us deal with that, you know, then we're in bad shape. I think, you know, whereas the water treatment plant, that is what we do. That is our community. So I'm more inclined to hold out and try and get full grant funding for it, because we've got full grant funding in the past for this. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be again. Councillor Van Alphen and then Barkle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am along the same lines of thinking. It's not like we just found out about this yesterday. We've known about this now for 10, 11, 12 years. Ever since the Testa Linda situation arose in Oliver, they inspected all the dams and said, hey, you should increase your spillway. And now all of a sudden there's $1 million. My hat's off to staff looking for these grants, and I appreciate it, but I don't think the taxpayers of Summerland should be on the hook for the rest of it. If it's such a catastrophic situation, then the province needs to step up and pay the money. You know, it can't be, and I agree with Councillor Patton. Next year, we're back to the taxpayers again. Oh, by the way, we want to upgrade our water treatment facility. Tonight, we've got a couple more on our agenda. You know, where does it stop? And like the government's got to step up and, you know, and fund this. If they funded Eisentalk, they can fund Garnet Valley too. Thank you.
Further to Councillor Van Alphen's comments, there's a lot of other projects that is being viewed as necessary in the water utility that there's probably much smaller opportunities to get grant funding for. So I go along with Councillor Holmes. I think that we should go back to the trough, if that's the term. I think the odds are good. I think we beg and plead that they extend our time process on the grant we do have. And yeah, we know that the solar project grant, it was years from the time it was announced to when something was actually completed, and it was also extended and the scope reduced, and so they're not always inflexible, and so we should at least try on this. I think there's a way better chance for money on this project than any other project we have on the works for this.
Okay, Councillor Trainer, then I'll ask for a motion.
Okay, I can put forward a motion now,
Okay.
unless anybody else has any comments. If that's your job to ask that.
Oh, Mr. Sorrell?
Just, thank you, just listening. I was just contemplating, and Devin and I have talked about this before too, but I just wonder if the funder would be interested in awarding it to us to allow us to do the design next year, which is the plan for next year. We've gone back and forth with them on that particular topic a few times already. But time is short. We have to sign today, but we could make a call as soon as we walk out of here and see if we can get them on the phone. And I don't know if we need a resolution for that, but we could just see if we can get the design funded. That's next year, and we can get this thing detailed design like Councillor Barkwell was saying, get a good detailed plan. And then at least we've paid for some design work, and we can get in our capital program a proper estimate. So that's something we could do as well.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, Okay.
We might need some help from our corporate officer here
So,
for the motion, but maybe just.
So basically, the intent of, I think, our motion is to move the Garnett Dam spillway widening project back to 2026. And that the Director of Utilities inquire about whether we can use that $1 million grant towards a design for the project. And that we move the water treatment plan conversion project back to 2025.
Okay, so I don't think we have to move anything back because nothing's being,
Okay, that's.
we
good. I was
we could probably just not even, we could probably just receive for information and not do anything,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Well, I was just summarizing our.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, we know what you mean. It's just,
Okay.
it's just,
So
we don't
every,
have to, we
okay.
don't have to undo something once
Okay.
we do it and we
no,
haven't done it.
that sounds good. All right.
So
Okay.
we just receive for information and and do we need to provide any direction for about repurposing or anything? No? Okay. Counselor Barkle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the Director of Utilities here, is that the time? No. Yeah. I think you had a good idea there with, asking them to supply the funding towards the design, but could you ask them, can we apply that $1 million to design and riprap or some part that would, you think would spend the $1 million and basically reduce the scope of the work like we did for the solar project, try and get the whole $1 million, but because I don't think the design would cost $1 million. See how it goes. Yeah.
Okay, so someone like to bring Counselor Jenner brought the motion to receive. Second, Counselor Patton. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries. What do we got next here? 7.2, BC's new Emergency and Disaster Management Act. CAO?
I can speak to that. Thank you, Mayor Holmes. What we're looking for on this one is just council's support that a joint letter could be signed. And so in the case of Summerland, you'd be signing a draft letter, Mayor Holmes, getting back to the province to give them some feedback on the changes that are happening and will happen to the Emergency and Disaster Management Act. So just in terms of a bit of background there, the Act received royal assent on November 8th, 2023, and that means the legislation is now in force. However, significant components of the Act will come into effect later on through regulation. And it incorporates lessons learned from recent emergencies, climate change considerations, and other conversations the province has had with local governments around the province. And there's sort of a renewed focus on the 4 phases of emergency management, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And ultimately, as much as it is a noble effort, and I think a good overall direction on the part of the province to make significant changes, in our conversations at the administration level and the various municipalities in the RDOS, we do have concerns that there's some downloading there from the province to local government and some sweeping changes that really do need some time to absorb, including things like incorporating Indigenous consultation, not just in the recovery phase, but also in the response phase during an event, Indigenous consultation. And we think we need some time to do those things properly. And so you'll see the draft letter, and it is just draft. I think there'll be some further tweaks and changes as it works through various mayors and councils. But the letter is designed to highlight some of the positive elements that we applaud the province is doing, but also highlight some of the elements where we think we need a bit more time and in some cases a bit more funding to actually be able to equip ourselves properly to roll out the various and sundry changes. So it's just looking for council support on that. And then in turn, when the letter is finalized, then all the various mayors would be able to sign this and get it off to the province.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions? Councilor Betts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find this item actually so relative to the item that we just finished our conversation about, because on the draft letter, page 2, the third item is talking about mitigation and the amount of resources that are required to, align response to the entire framework that they're asking every community to do, to assess every possible risk that could possibly ever affect your town, and then have a response to the greatest level to every single disaster that might ever happen. I mean, the amount of cost is, it's exceptional. And so I think that having a different kind of discussion about what mitigation means is really important. And I mean, I think the other points are really just so important about the Indigenous consultation, but there's also capacity building. And there's this expectation on local government that our connections and partnerships with Indigenous communities are just instantly going to reach the same level of consultation. And I think the expectation, I think time is going to be required a little bit more. So I support this letter for a lot of different reasons.
CEO?
Yeah, just thank you, Councillor, through the mayor, for your comments, and you're absolutely right. With all the modernization that the Act is bringing, there's certain, I guess you could say, elephant in the room elements that are antiquated as well. And one of the ones mentioned, as you say, the disaster financial assistance program itself really still is only equipped and funded to support restoration or rebuilding of existing structures, even when it's determined through an event that those structures are inadequate. So it just doesn't make sense sometimes. We've encountered that ourselves. Some of our flood repair work that came from 2017, where the district had to fork out additional money to get back to a better place on our restoration, because the Disaster Act wouldn't cover anything but a replacement of what was there previously. So you're right on point there.
I just have a couple things on the letter itself here. The second paragraph, during the regular chief, council, and board of director meetings. What's a chief meeting?
Yeah, I think that's just a typo there. I don't believe we're looking for PIB to sign the letter, although they might sign the letter, but they're not listed as a signatory right now. So. Okay,
so if that's the case, then it should probably be clarified as Silic's chief, because I wasn't sure if it was Silic's chief, fire chief, CAOs. That I was kind of confused about what that meant. So I think that clarification. And then under vulnerable populations in that paragraph, in addition, it needs to be recognized that regional districts and many municipalities, in that they do not have a social, there's just the wording is, it doesn't make sense, that sentence. So, Councillor Peak.
I had some wordsmithing comments as well. I actually passed them over to Graham because I thought they were a little nitpicky. But I did want to make mention on A5, should there be any additional matters described for the purpose of emergency management plans. And I put a comment in that centralization of service delivery in areas such as health, social services create a gap in funding recognition of local needs. And I think that that kind of thing should be recognized in the letter that goes forward in some form or fashion.
Okay, well, good. If someone could bring forward a motion, please.
Sure, I'll bring forward the motion as written.
Okay, second, Councillor Peak. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? None opposed. That carries. Oh, we're on our break. We're zooming ahead. Why don't we? Can we just zoom ahead? Because we're ahead of schedule here. So 7.4 for Prairie Valley Road upgrades, loan authorization. This would be corporate officer, please.
Thank you, Mayor Holmes. So before council is the required loan authorization bylaw to begin the process of long-term borrowing through an alternative approval process. otherwise known as an AAP, to fund the Prairie Valley Road upgrades. So under the community charter, long-term borrowing must be approved by the electors either through an assent vote or referendum or through an AAP. At its December 19th, 2023 meeting, council resolved to borrow the required funds of 2.5 million and that the funds will be recovered through a 1.96 property tax increase over a 20-year amortization period beginning in 2025. The estimated cost of property owners will be approximately $34.60 per year. Should the bylaw be given its first 3 readings, the bylaw will then be sent to the Inspector of Municipalities for review and approval. Upon receiving this approval, notice will be given in accordance with the community charter and the AAP will begin on the last day of the notice, and that's expected to be March 7th. The AAP for loan authorization bylaw 2024-04, subject to inspector approval, will then begin on March 7th, 2024. Attached to this report is the elector response form that those electors who are not in favor will be required to submit during the period in which the AAP is running. If an elector is in favor of council adopting the loan authorization bylaw, then they would not have to do anything. Council must set a deadline for elector response forms to be submitted. The deadline must be at least 30 days after the second publication of the notice in the newspaper. And the proposed deadline to submit elector response forms would be Tuesday, April 9th, 2024 at 5 p.m. The corporate officer is then responsible for determining and certifying the results of the AAP. If 10% of the total number of electors within the district submit a valid elector response forms by the deadline, then council may not proceed with the adoption of the loan authorization bylaw unless approval of the electors is obtained through a referendum or an assent vote. According to Elections BC, the total number of registered electors within the district of Summerland as of December 20th, 2023 is 10,130. This is the most recent provincial voters list extract, and approval of the electors for bylaw number 2024-04 would be obtained if the number of elector response forms for the bylaw is less than 1,013. So the results of the AAP will be reported to council at a special meeting as noted in the staff recommendations proposed for Thursday, April 11th at 10 a.m. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you. Council, any questions? None, if someone could bring a motion forward. Councillor Betts.
Bring the motion forward as written.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell are seconding. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. That carries. 7.5, corporate officer. You gonna say all that over again?
So thank you. Thank you, Mayor Holmes. So this is the required loan authorization bylaw for the long-term for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, the primary clarifier. So at the December 19th meeting, council resolved to borrow the required $1,232,000 to be recovered through a 5.66 sewer rate increase over a 20-year amortization period beginning in 2025. The estimated cost to users will be approximately $24.94 per year. And I won't go into everything I just said. The AAP will run at the same time as the previous one. So it will begin on March 7th and the deadline will be April 9th. And we will be presenting the results to council at a special meeting on April 11th. And if you have any questions about this bylaw or the AAP process, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, council, any questions? No, someone wants to bring the motion forward. Councillor Peak, second. Councillor Betts, any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? None opposed. That carries. 7.6, Silga resolutions. Corporate officer.
Thank you again. So Silga has put out the call for resolutions to be submitted as part of the upcoming 2024 annual convention. Resolutions should be relative to regional issues and must be endorsed by the sponsoring members municipal council. Resolutions must be submitted by Thursday, February 29th, 2024. Council at this time may provide staff direction on topics for resolutions to be considered. Staff will then take any direction received today to draft the resolutions and bring back at the February 6th meeting for endorsement. And additionally, there are several proposed pre-drafted resolutions for council to consider, and those resolutions may be endorsed at this time. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, thank you. So I was thinking of bringing these forward at this meeting and so we could talk about them. And maybe the corporate officer, have you already looked at the ones that and they're okay the way they're written? Okay, so we can, if we want, move them forward now. Do we want to just go through each one, the pre, and one at a time? So the first one is servicing ALR lands. This is something we've talked about for years and years now. It's kind of self-explanatory. I think everybody knows that issue. Yeah, Councillor Peak.
I think it's a good motion. I was concerned a little bit about the last part, therefore be resolved, the British Columbia to develop a program to support local government efforts to adequately service ALR lands. I wondered if they might think that their grant application program was the one that would do that.
What? The one we just turned down.
Yes,
All right. Well,
well, they have lots of grant.
yeah.
programs.
Yeah. I guess, the reason how many years ago we did bring a motion forward quite a few years ago, about 4 years ago now, I guess, with a more prescriptive solution. I can't remember, maybe Councillor Barkle remembers, but it was more like, I can't remember what it was, but it was a kind of a prescriptive solution of what they should be doing for us. And we thought the approach this time, maybe rather than prescribe, let UBCM and the province work it out. The challenge is even getting them to recognize that it's an issue. And then if they recognize it's an issue, then they can let them work out the solution rather than us propose a solution. It's much easier for them to say, no, that's not a good solution. Then, so that we're just trying to change around and say, okay, you come up with the solution then. That was my thinking and by making it, broader that way. So. But, we can be more specific in terms of what we expect. I don't really, I think we'll take any compensation, any money, whatever you throw out our way. Councillor Barkwell.
What you're saying there is exactly how I was thinking for the one I did on the septic systems, not try and suggest a solution, but, have the experts study the situation and come up with their answer, and rather than make it a little harder for them to just say no. But I do see, without trying to be cynical, I think what Councillor Peak's point was that that's a likely response from the province is, oh, well, we got these wonderful grants programs, blah, blah, blah. And I wonder if we wouldn't want to say something like, I don't know if it looks good this way, but the concept you'll understand is a regular funding program is maybe what we're looking for of some kind, without being too prescriptive. Yeah.
Maybe the word program is the problem. Maybe it shouldn't be a program. Well, just, yeah. But I hear what you guys are saying. CAO, do you have any bright ideas?
Generally or specifically on this item? So my thought on this one, if further to Councillor Peak's comment, through the chair, is, we could make a slight tweak just to say a new model or a new program. You just add the word new to clarify that they can't. We don't give them a big enough hole in the fence to jump through to say, oh, we gave you money through the Growing Communities Fund. But if we wanted to really be more customized and direct, we could, for the purposes of discussion, put something different forward that we haven't before. And that is because I think we've talked maybe in the past about this, but right now, local government is quite limited in its ability to tax these lands because the BC assessment keeps the value of the lands low, which impinges on our ability to put proper infrastructure and maintenance in place. But the provincial government makes good tax money on transfer tax because the properties are sold at market value when they sell. And so the province is getting their significant transfer tax value on market value. And so if a new program was to be proposed for those communities that are committed to the vision that is the agricultural land reserve. It might be to say we want a portion of the transfer tax on market that the province is using as a significant revenue stream to them with nothing coming back to service those lands. And there's lots of turnover in transaction in the ALR area in our own community and others that even a portion of that would offer a sustainable, I think, mechanism that, so if you wanted to put a finer point on it so we can drive discussion, that's something you can do. If you wanted to keep it broader, you just call it a new model and just see go there.
So here's our challenge. So when we brought this to Silga last time, it didn't pass Silga. Silga didn't approve it. So it didn't even get to UBCM. And so the problem is, unless there's not many municipalities like ours that have a lot of ag land. Most ag land is in regional districts. And this doesn't really apply for them because they don't pay for the roads in regional districts, but we do, right? So it's hard for those more urban areas to really relate to this at all. And so our first challenge is get it past Silga. Once we get it past Silga, then I think it gets easier because then we can rally support from all those other rural municipalities on the island and up north and everything that have a lot of agriculture, and then we can get their support. But in the Silga region, there's kind of us and Lake Country and not too many others, in that would support this. Salmon Arm maybe, but so we need to word it in a way that Silga members will approve it. And then we got to make sure once it gets past Silga, then it'll be something that the province, would support, not whitewash. So it's kind of a twin challenge that way. Most resolutions aren't. It's just worded in a way that you have to worry about the province. So that's why I think we need to think about that too. How do we get Silga to approve it? I'll go to CEO first, then Councilor Barkwell, and Councilor
Yeah,
Betts.
thank you, Mayor. And just to one point of clarity, I think you probably know this anyway. I mean, it's always desirable to build consensus through Silga. We don't have to put it through Silga. We can submit it directly. And so another strategy could be, maybe it's a Zoom call with those district municipalities group before June 15th or whatever the deadline is for a direct resolution, and build the consensus about the ones who get it and care. And it doesn't mean that we don't do something also through Silga, but at least we would have a significant, and maybe even that group, if they agree with whatever model, it turns into a resolution, but also a request to meet with said ministers as a group together to talk about it, something significant like that. Because I think you organized the first ever district municipalities meeting last year, and there was good momentum there.
Barkwell?
I think that, we can go directly to UBCM, and I don't know if a resolution that comes through Silga contains more weight or not when it gets to UBCM. But it also, in case there's something that doesn't go right at Silga, it gives us another kick at the can. So going to Silga is a no-loss kind of a process here. And I think what we want to do is the personal discussions and stuff, and if we can, or through the Zoom meeting, I think the people speaking at the microphone when the resolution is presented at the plenary session carries a lot of weight. So if we can organize a few of us to get up there and speak to the resolution, it has a far better chance of passing at both Silga and UBCM. And the other thing I was going to say, perhaps we could just use an annual funding model to replace the foregone rural tax revenue or ALR tax revenue, something like that. I was thinking of the word annual rather than because of what we have, the problems we have with the word grant. But I'll throw that out there for discussion.
Councilor Betts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry to not just directly answer that question, but one thing I had wanted to speak to in the wording of the actual of the resolution as it stands, I think right now, to me, what it's lacking is that it doesn't speak to the greater impact. We're talking about, the cost of servicing farmland for the benefit of all British Columbians. Okay, great. Falls unfairly on residential taxpayers within agricultural communities. But if we're talking rather than that, the issue for us is that it's limited because we're foregoing tax revenue because we're maintaining ALR land. So we are restricted in our ability to service our communities with when you have X amount of ALR lands within your municipal boundaries. So, do you see where I'm going with this? It's not just talking about servicing farmland, but it's talking about servicing communities. And the impact on sustaining and placing importance on ALR land is sacrificing our community's ability to service our infrastructure.
So I'd like to make a suggestion that maybe we not pass this today. And then, we can kind of take on board some of the comments that are being made and bring it back next meeting. That might be, yeah, okay. Councillor Barkle?
So if I understand what Councillor Adrian had said, you're saying that there's more, we lose more than just the cost of servicing that land. Some of their taxes would go to other community features like that, I don't know, the rec center and maintaining City Hall and all those things. So it's costing us more than just the cost of the extra roads and stuff. Yeah.
Councillor Tring?
Sorry, I know you want to move on from this. I just have a really quick comment. I think that and we have said this to the province board before, but I think the bottom line is that we are fulfilling a provincial mandate. And it's not our choice. We have to. And so I think an acknowledgement of that from the province, and that is a hardship on us in delivering services, and that a yearly subsidy to help deliver a provincial mandate is what we are looking for.
Councillor Peak?
I don't know the wording you did last time to get it through UBCM, but the fact is, as Councillor Trainer said, the mandate to hold ALR land for a restricted use means that we do not receive a type of tax money that we would normally receive for lands. And we need a share of the tax money that we forego because of this mandated program from the government.
So ideally what I like to see coming out of this is that, if it passes through UBCM, is that UBCM and the government set up some sort of working group to figure out, what's a good solution. And I would love to be part of that working group, if it came up. So that's kind of what, the result I hope. But Councillor Barkle?
Do we have an answer for the bureaucrat who said, well, just raise your mill rate to 10,000 or multiplier by 10,000 like Oak Bay did? I mean, that's one possible response of the province. Yeah, sure, you can tax those guys, but it's you got to force onto them. No, that's your provincial priority, really, that they don't get taxed.
But even if we double our farm taxes, it's not going to raise. It's going to raise nothing. It's not. Councillor Val?
It's their program. The ELC was brought in by the government to preserve agricultural land, and I can respect that. But I also respect we have had this conversation with bureaucrats prior to. That was one of the recommendations, was to increase the mill rate. The other recommendation was to annex us into the RDOS. So if these are the people we have to talk to, I agree with Mayor Holmes. We need a working group of, like-minded mayors and councillors and bureaucrats, because those answers were appalling, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one, the produce stickers. This is, Cameron spoke about that this morning. You can imagine a whole field full of produce stickers in all the farmers' fields if something's not done about it. So that's that's fine the way it is. Okay. So the grant processing timelines. This is, well, we know this one very well, I think. And the rec center, we're still waiting to hear about that grant. So it's been going on a year. So I just think that, they, it's like, do what we do what we say, don't do as we do. That's kind of the feeling I get for every single grant that we apply for, and you're just left waiting, and it's just, it just causes problems for everybody. Councillor Peak.
They have more people working for them than we do. They can do this properly.
And again, the assent voting ballot question, this is directly related from our referendum as well, that came out of that, where people were very frustrated by that. They just had a yes or no choice, and that there was no alternative and no ranked choices or anything like that. And it was, we spent a lot of time having to explain to people that this is the way the provincial law works, and this is, but they had, I think people had a very good point that we not always want to be limited to a yes or no choice, that you would like to have multiple options on a ballot question, but we're not able to. So why not? That's a fair question, I think. Councillor Betts.
Thank you. I think you just bring up such an important point, now that the updated recreation center repairs came in at approximately $30 million. A new facility was going to be $50 million. I think it would have been really great to be able to say that to the community. Here are your choices, not just yes or no. And unfortunately, we just weren't allowed that. And I think this is a really positive step forward, saying that we don't accept that that was our only option as local government. We weren't able to be as effective as we needed to be, and it was very unfortunate. So let's propose an improvement. I like that.
1 hectare limit. I'll let Councillor Barkwell speak to this one.
Any questions to it? I mean, maybe it needs to be wordsmithed. I don't know.
I guess my only question is it, so this was brought forward last year as well, right?
Not the same, no.
So how is it different?
I can't tell you. I did have discussions with Rick Noodle, who brought last year's forward. I think it was basically, it was simply eliminate the 1 hectare rule rather than say, do as you talk about, get a group working together and figure out what would be appropriate. Because there could be a lot of exceptions or something. It could be kind of complicated.
Okay, so do we want to bring forward all of them except the first one now? And then we'll bring back that ALR properties one next council meeting. Yeah. And is there any others that ideas people had? We still have next council meeting if there is, so. Okay, so somebody want to bring that motion forward? Councillor Peak. Second. Councillor Van Elfen. So corporate officer, you got all of that. You've got that, all of them except the servicing LR properties one. Which one? Okay. I'll call any discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. That carries. Okay, so no bylaws for adoption. Items removed from the consent agenda. 4.4A. That's the letter from Heritage, is it? Councillor Betts?
Yes. No.
Oh, no. Museum. No.
Royal Museum.
The Royal Museum.
Oh, the Royal Museum.
Oh, Royal BC Museum. There you go. Yeah.
Thank you. So the reason that I brought this one forward is the Royal BC Museum is asking residents of BC to have your say on the future of the Royal BC Museum. And there are currently a number of different ways to have your say, to learn more about what the future might hold. And there was already one proposal that came forward, and then it was put on hold due to wanting to have further conversation and consultation with the residents of British Columbia. So if you'd like to join the conversation about what that means to you, you can share your thoughts. Just look at the Royal BC Museum, and there's a survey that you can go ahead and get connected with. That's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you. Then we have to accept that for information. Because we did the consent agenda. Councillor Peak, Councillor Trainer, all in favor? That carries. Public comment period. Mr. Betzler.
Hi, Council, Brad Besler. At the Committee of the Whole meeting earlier today, district staff recommended that starting in April of this year, garbage collection be reduced from once a week to every second week. Staff's report to council says this will not result in any cost savings to residents. Instead, it will be an unnecessary inconvenience. This will likely result in more problems with wildlife. People are already talking online about dumping their garbage on the front steps of Municipal Hall, and I'm not encouraging that in any way, but I certainly understand that sentiment. A local resident commented online today that rather than trying to save the planet, maybe district staff and council should focus on the day-to-day city operations because the garbage bins are already full after 1 week. In my opinion, council needs to make decisions that are in the best interests of Summerland residents instead of blindly accepting whatever biased opinions district staff present to you. And I also want to echo Mr. Lorney's comments earlier. I'm strongly opposed to the mine proposal at the end of Garden Valley Road. And I think it's important that council send a unanimous letter also in strong opposition to the Minister of Mines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who'd like to make comment? Don't see any. We're going to get a resolution to close the meeting to the public pursuant to sections 91C, E, G, and M of the Community Charter. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts, all in favor? Carries. We'll just take a 5-minute break.